Gardening books say that you shouldn't grow the same vegetable on the same spot every year, because doing this can create problems such as the depletion of the soil and the build-up of pests and diseases. However, you can avoid all of these issues if you follow a programme of crop rotation. So if you are new to gardening, you may be asking, what is crop rotation and how does it work? So the vegetables we tend to grow fall into three basic groups. So you've got your brassicas, which are things like your Brussels sprouts, your cabbage, your cauliflower, broccoli, and then you have the roots. So you've got carrots, parsnips, beetroot and potatoes, and then all the other vegetables. So it's kind of the alliums, so that would be your garlic, your leeks, your onions, your shallots, the legumes, which are peas and beans, and then all the leafy crops, so salad crops, salad lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, spinach, and even sweet corn. They form the third group. So there are other vegetables that are more permanent and they are not included in this. So it's things like your rhubarb and your asparagus and all your fruit bushes and fruit trees. Now, by organising your plot or your garden to keep these three groups separate, you can actually reduce the soil depletion, and you can limit your crop specific pests and diseases, because you're moving your plants around the garden each year within their groups. It helps create a balanced ecosystem. Now let's imagine 3 garden beds over 3 years, and if we focus on bed 1 and move anti-clockwise, so in the first year you plant your root crops. Now they're going to break up the soil. When you come to the second year, in that same bed you're now going to plant your legumes, and they have deep roots which will really benefit from the improved soil left by the root crops. In the third year, you're then going to plant your brassicas in that bed. Now they are going to thrive on the nitrogen-rich soil left by the legumes. So in the fourth year, you then start the cycle again, because you're back to the same as year 1 with the root crops. And you just keep repeating this process each year. I do need to be honest though, because it's easy to manage 3 different growing areas if you've got an allotment or you've got a lot of space. It gets much harder if you've got limited space like I have. However, there are ways to reduce this problem. If you avoid planting the same crop in the same spot 2 years in a row, and then if you incorporate companion planting, which is going to attract helpful insects and keep pests away, your crops should do really well. And what I like to do is I like to keep a record of everything that I grow and the location that I grow it in, so that I don't repeat myself the following year. Now, I grow all of my potatoes in these 30-litre buckets because I simply don't have the room in the beds to grow the potatoes. So I don't always change the compost every year. What I tend to do is every other year I'll save half of it, put half on the beds, and then I'll top it up with some bloodfish and bone and some fresh compost. But I did that last year and I don't want to do it again this year. So I'm starting from scratch this year. So I've just filled up my wheelbarrow with some soil improver. I've grabbed some of the worms that were in the old compost to go back in the bucket, and they can do their work. And I'm only going to fill it up about 4 inches, because in about 3 weeks' time I shall be sowing my potatoes, and I need to sow them halfway down the bucket before I top it right up. So let's get this back in this pot. Worms and all. The worms are great because they digest everything that's in the compost and break everything down, and it just makes everything so crumbly and light. So that's my first done. So that bed there has got all the spent potatoes potato compost, and it is so fine and crumbly. It's absolutely beautiful, and that's because there were a huge network of really big worms, huge worms, so they've done a great job of working their way through that organic matter and breaking it down even further. So that's on that bed now, and then I shall take you over here and show you where all my potato buckets are now. So they're all over here, they're all prepped, ready for my sowings in a few weeks' time. So there's nothing I like better than to actually sit down with a coffee and have all my notes spread out in front of me and begin to plan my planting scheme for the coming season. So I tend to look through old photos and footage of individual beds to see what has been planted in previous years, and then try and find a suitable place for everything that I want to grow in the current year. But rules are to be broken, aren't they? So you may consider the traditional crop rotation system as the gold standard, but we have to be realistic, and I think as long as you have a basic understanding, then it is okay to adapt, just as I have every year. So if we look at my garden, I've got 7 beds. So one is permanently planted with herbs, so we can deduct that from my planning. So that now leaves me with 6 beds. I then have 3 beds which are occupied with overwintering garlic, leeks and onions, which will leave me with 3 beds. Now ordinarily I would have a strong crop of overwintering broad beans. Sown in October, they would probably finish by the end of June to free up another bed for something like sweet corn or courgettes, but I lost them to the extreme weather conditions over the winter and have had to re-sow. So they are going to take up a lot of room, and because I'm planting them out so late, they're not going to mature till at least June. So now I'm down to 2 beds, but I do have a plan, so let me show you. So with everything that I've had to consider, I've come up with a plan of sorts. Now, I'm sitting here between these 2 beds, and my plan is that this bed now is going to have the courgette in it. I do have some raspberry canes that are coming back, they're up against the fence, but I've got room here for 1, maybe 2 courgettes. I'm not quite sure how many I'm going to have yet, but that's earmarked for the courgette. These are my broad beans. Now they've been hardening off for a few days now. They'll have another few more days out here. They go in at night, they go into the greenhouse at night, but I bring them out during the day so they get climatised. Now they are going to be sown in this bed. Now I've picked this bed rather than the one that I originally planted my broad beans in because I need the space. So I figured if I use this longer bed, I might get away with just 1 long row, maybe a row and a half of the broad beans, which means the rest of the bed I can use for my dwarf beans, so my pongo beans and purple queen. And between this bed and the one where the leeks are at the moment, I'm going to have one of my frames so that I can grow my climbing beans and runner beans. So this bed will be dedicated mostly to beans and maybe peas as well. I'll have to see how much room I've got. So if we move down the garden, so where I'm pointing here and here, between these 2 beds, I'm going to have my bean frame. And then the leeks, they should come out, I'm thinking, probably the end of May. I'm not sure what I'm going to put in that bed yet. I haven't earmarked it for anything, but if I come round a little bit further, I'll take you over to that bed. So this is going to be a mixed bed, so hopefully my salads, mostly salads, but a lot of companion planting as well. So I'm probably going to have a tomato out here, but things like different lettuces and salad leaves, spring onions, coriander and some basil. Mix it up a bit, lots of different colours and textures, possibly some chard as well, and just see if I can make it as diverse as possible. So that's that bed, and then I need to turn you around. So all going well, I'm expecting to harvest all these onions and garlic by the beginning of June, which will free up these beds. So this bed in particular is going to be for my sweet corn, and this one is going to be quite experimental for me. I've got a load of seeds here that I'll show you in a minute, but basically this is going to be a brassica bed, but I'm going to grow a few things that I'm not particularly keen on, but I'm trying to make myself eat because obviously they're healthy. So I've had a dislike of cabbage since I was a child. As a child it used to be not cooked very imaginatively. It used to be almost boiled to death, and I hated it, and I've hated it all my adult life, and I hardly ever buy a cabbage, but I'm going to grow just a couple. I do like Brussels sprouts, so I'm going to grow a couple of Brussels sprouts and then some kohlrabi, and then if there's enough room I'll put in a couple of cauliflowers as well, because later in the year I also some overwintering cauliflowers. So that's my plans for all of these beds. I'm quite hopeful that I've catered for everything. So as you can see, I've carefully planned my garden. I've chosen the vegetables that I want to grow. I've organised them into their relative groups, and I've worked out a planting plan that doesn't repeat anything from last year. So with good planning, you too can create a smart crop rotation plan for your garden and your allotment, and this will give you healthier, tastier vegetables, better soil health and a lower risk of pests and diseases. And plus it's easy to do, so just focus on the big picture and plan your crops wisely. So please leave a comment below and share with me your crop rotation experiences. Have you had successes or failures, and what are your favourite crop combinations? And if you want more gardening tips and tricks and haven't subscribed yet, then please consider doing so. So have a great week everybody, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm Annie, and this is my kitchen garden.